Hey guys, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to get a Node.js app up and running on a DigitalOcean server, also called a droplet. Now, one important thing that I want to stress is that there's a ton of different ways to deploy a Node.js app, and by no means am I saying that this way is the best. In fact, I wanted to create a tutorial using something like Flight Plan for better automation, but it was an absolute disaster on Windows. So I'll be making a Flight Plan tutorial, but most likely on Linux. But I did want to make something for Windows client users. So let's take a look at what we'll be doing. Now, we're not just doing the deployment, we're setting up a server from scratch. I'm going to give you a referral link that'll give you $10 or 2 months free for DigitalOcean. And if you want to keep that going, it's only going to run you $5 per month for the lowest package, and you can increase that at any time. So following along with this tutorial will cost you nothing. I would definitely suggest DigitalOcean for all of your server needs: Node.js, the mean stack, PHP applications, pretty much anything you can think of. You essentially get a dedicated server or a VPS that will do anything you want. Okay, you can do absolutely anything with it. So we're going to set up an Ubuntu droplet, which is just DigitalOcean's term for a server. You can create these on the fly, and you can create as many as you want. So we're going to be using Windows. So we're going to need our Windows client. So we're going to need a way to connect to our server. So we're going to be using a tool called Putty. Alright, so we're going to need to set up SSH keys for our client and server as well. So we're going to use a tool called PuttyGen. We're also going to download a tool called WinSCP, which will give us a GUI program to connect to our server. So we can actually drag and drop files and folders to and from the server. Alright, so we'll set up and use the SSH keys. Once we do that, we're going to disable the password login for security purposes. We're going to create a new user because we don't want to use the root user. In fact, we're going to disable the root user altogether. Once our server is set up, along with our SSH keys, we'll install Node.js. We're also going to need to install Git because we're going to use a GitHub repository to bring our application onto the server. Alright, we'll need to set up SSH keys for that as well. Alright, once we connect to GitHub, we're just going to clone a simple app and set that up on the server. Now, normally you would type npm start or node app and it runs your application, but it always needs to be running in the command line, and that's a huge problem if your server resets or something like that. So we're going to be installing and using something called PM2, which will allow our app to run as a process in the background. Alright, once our app is up and running, I'll show you how to link a domain name to it using your DigitalOcean droplet, and then we'll finally install a package called libcap2bin, and this will allow you to run the app on port 80 so that you don't have to provide the port number with the domain name. Alright, so it seems like a lot, but it's really not. Once you do it, you'll be able to, deploy as many Node apps as you want from GitHub. Again, this isn't a complete production guide. You're going to want to look more into server administration and security and maybe a better workflow using something like Flight Plan. But at this point, it's going to head you in the right direction. Alright guys, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing you want to do is create an account at DigitalOcean. So you'll want to sign up, and you'll have to enter either your PayPal account or a credit card. But like I said, the referral link that I'm going to give you gives you either 2 free months of the lowest package or $10 free if you want to get something bigger. Alright, so go ahead and sign up for that. Once you sign up and you log in, you should see something like this. Okay, so it's just a list of where your droplets will be. I wiped out all the droplets I had. They were just for testing. And that's another thing. Even if you're not going to use this for production, just sign up for the lowest package just so you have a remote server to do testing on. You can try out different packages, different software, and it's really helpful, and it's a great learning experience in itself. Alright, so I also want to mention that I do have a blog post on traversymedia.com that's going to kind of go through everything we're doing here and kind of give you some instructions and give you all the code, all the snippets, commands that we're going to be using. And we'll probably reference this throughout as well. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and click on Create Droplet. And we're going to have some options to choose from. Now, the first thing we need to choose is a Linux distribution. So we're going to use Ubuntu. It's what I would suggest, and you can use different versions as well if you want. But you also have the option for FreeBSD, Fedora, Debian, CoreOS, CentOS, and I believe there's others as well. And then just to show you, if we click on one-click apps, if you wanted to set up, for instance, the mean stack or just a MongoDB database or the LAMP stack, Apache PHP, you can do all that in just one click. Even content management systems like Drupal, Magento. So that is really helpful. But we're just going to have a clean blank server to work with. Okay, so we're not going to use any of those. Next thing we want to choose is a size or package. Now by default we have the $20 package highlighted, which is 2 gigabytes of RAM, 2 CPUs, 40 gigabyte SSD, and 3 terabyte transfer, which isn't bad at all. But we're going to choose the lowest package, which is $5 a month, and it's 512 megabytes of RAM, 1 CPU, 20 gigabyte SSD, and 1000 gigabyte transfer. And that's another great thing about DigitalOcean, is that they use SSDs for all of their servers, which is makes things much faster. Alright, down here we're not going to add any block storage. Data center, we're going to choose New York. You obviously want to choose whatever's closest to you. Okay, you can add additional options like private networking, backups, IP6, user data monitoring, but we're not going to choose any of those. Alright, so now we're going to set up our SSH keys. Now you don't have to do it here, you can do it later on, but it's easier to just get it out of the way. So we're going to go ahead and do this. If I click on new SSH key, it's going to ask us to paste in our public key. So to create that, to get that, we're going to use something called PuttyGen. Alright, so if we go to putty.org and click on this link here, there's two things we need. Putty.exe is the SSH client we're going to use to connect to our server. So you're going to want that. You're also going to want this PuttyGen to generate our SSH keys. Alright, now these are actual programs, they're not installers, so whoop, I don't want to run it. So you want to put these somewhere, wherever you want to keep them. So I'm going to just grab them and I'm going to put them in my C drive in a folder called Putty. Alright, and then we're going to open up PuttyGen because we need to create our SSH keys. Okay, so it looks like this. And what we're going to do is click on generate, and it's going to say please generate some randomness by moving the mouse around the blank area. Alright, so now our key is created. So what we want to do is copy this whole thing, so from the very beginning down to the very end. Copy that, and then back in our sign up page we're going to paste that in, and we're going to name it. I'm just going to call this I'm going to call it public key, just public key 1, and then we're going to add SSH key. Okay, so now it's added. Now before we move on here, I just want you to save your public and private key. So right here we'll click save public key, and we're going to save it to the desktop. I'm just going to call it public key 1.txt. Alright, so that'll save it to the desktop, which is right here. And then also save private key. It's going to ask if you want a passphrase. You can make it a little more secure. If you want to, you can put that in here, but we're going to just skip the passphrase. And let's call this private key 1, and that's going to give it a PPK extension. Alright, so we'll save that. And now we have our public key and private key files. So you want to put these somewhere safe. Alright, so we're done with PuttyGen. We can close that up. And back to our page over here. If you want to use the default host name, you can, but I'm just going to name it something else. I'm just going to call it Traversy Media Droplet. Alright, so we can go ahead and click create, and that'll set up our server in literally seconds. Alright, so our server is now set up. That's the IP address right there. Now if we click on this, it'll take us to this interface where we can get some information. The CPU and input-output graph isn't showing yet, but that will come up momentarily. Let's see, we have this access tab where we can access the console. Droplet must be powered on. Is it not on yet? It might be, oh, it's still creating, that's why. But from here you can access the console, but I would definitely suggest using something like Putty to interact with your server. You can reset the root password, you can power it on and off, you can resize. Okay, so if you find out that your package isn't enough and you need some more memory or disk space, you can go ahead and upgrade that very easily, seamlessly. Alright, what else? Backups. Okay, so if you want to enable backups, you need to pay an extra $1 a month, but you can take snapshots. Okay, so you can take a kind of a, I guess, a disk image or a snapshot and restore that at any time. And then you can destroy it at any time too. Okay, and you can also just kind of reset it if you install a bunch of crap that you don't want and you just want to start from scratch. You can just wipe it out very easily. Alright, so our server should now be set up. So now what we want to do is connect to it using Putty. And let me just check to see. I think that's what we want to do next. Yep, so we want to connect to using Putty. So let's go ahead and open up putty.exe. Okay. So inside Putty, what we're going to do is we want to add our IP address, which is right here. Alright, now instead of connecting right now, I want to create a profile that we can save and we can use at any time. So what we're going to do is go down to the data, right here, connection, and then data. And right here is where you want to put the username you want to use. And by default, that's going to be root. We haven't created another user yet. And then we're going to click on SSH and then auth. And then this is where you want to upload your private key. So we're going to click browse. And we're going to upload that private key 1 PPK file. Alright, then we're going to go back to the session tab and we're going to give this session a name. I'm just going to call it Traversy Media Droplet, and I'm going to save that. Alright, and then I'll click open. Now whenever you connect to a server for the first time, you'll see this message. Just go ahead and click yes, and there we go. We didn't have to enter the root password or anything because we have our SSH keys set up. Alright, so the next thing we want to do, if we go back to the blog post, is create a new user, okay? Because you don't want to be using the root user. In fact, we're going to disable that altogether, just for security purposes. So to create a user, we can say add user, and let me just make this a little bigger so you guys can see it better. Let's see, change settings, appearance, font. Alright, so let's do add user, and I'm going to call my user Brad, and it's going to ask for a password. We're going to create a password for the user. Okay, it's going to ask for full name, and then this other stuff it asks, I'm just going to enter through that. Is this correct? Yes. Alright, now we can say ID Brad to see if that, yep, okay, so that user was created. But notice that he's not in the sudo group. We want to put him in sudo so that he can run things as administrator. So to do that, if we look at the blog post here, we want to use this usermod ag sudo and then the username. Alright, so we'll say usermod ag, what was it, ag sudo Brad. Alright, so now if we do ID Brad, you can see that now that user's in the sudo group. So now what we want to do is log in as that user, and we can do that with this command right here. So that'll be sudo su space dash space and then the username. Alright, so now you can see that the prompt here is changed to Brad at Traversy Media Droplet. So we're now logged in as Brad. And if we want to double check, we can say who am I, and we get Brad. Alright, so now what we want to do is authorize the key for the new user, because right now we won't be able to connect with the SSH key pair with the Brad user. So we need to make a directory called .ssh in our home directory. This little squiggly line here, this tilde, that represents the home directory. Alright, so let's say mkdir for make directory. And we want to do the home /.ssh. All right, next thing we want to do is chmod. We want to change the permission to 700. So squiggly slash .ssh. Okay, now what we want to do is create a file called authorized keys, and we want to paste our public key in there. So let's say nano, that's the editor we're going to use. And then we're going to say slash or tilde slash .ssh slash authorized underscore keys. All right, so now we're in that file and we want to paste in our key. So what we're going to do is open up the public key.txt file we created, and it should look like this. And what we want to grab is from here to the end, to here. Okay, copy that, and this has to be perfect. All right, and then in here what we're going to do is we're going to say SSH-RSA space, and then we're going to paste that in. Now this won't work because it's on multiple lines. We have to make sure that everything's on a single line. So we're going to go right here, click backspace once, and we're going to do the same on each line. Okay, because it will not work. If there's one flaw in this file, it won't work. Alright, so now everything's on one line. Should be good. So now what we're going to do is Control X to exit. It's going to ask if we want to save. We're going to say Y for yes, and then enter. Alright, so now that file should be saved. Now what we want to do is just change the permission of that file to 600. So we're going to say chmod 600 SSH slash authorized keys. Okay. Now what we want to do is just restart the SSH service. We can do that with sudo service SSH restart. Okay, it's going to ask for our password. Now what we want to do is we want to test it out and see if we can connect using Brad with the SSH key. So let's go ahead and exit. Actually, let's just close this out. And then we're going to go back into Putty. Alright, now we're going to click on the session that we saved and click load. It's going to load everything in, and then go to data, and we're going to change root to our new user, which I called Brad. Alright, and then I'll save it, and then we'll open that up. And now you can see we logged right in, no password needed, and we're logged in as Brad. So that's what we want. Alright, so now that we can connect using the Brad user with the SSH keys, we want to now remove the password login. Let's see, where are we? Right here. We want to remove the password login and the root login. So we're going to have to edit a file called SSHD config. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to say sudo nano slash etc slash ssh slash sshd underscore config. Enter our password. Okay, so this is the file here. Now what we're going to do is a Control W to search, and we want to search for permit login root. Is that it? No, permit root login, sorry. So Control W, permit root login. Alright, so right here you can see that it's set to yes. We're going to just go ahead and set that to no. Okay, now we're also going to do another search for password authentication. So right here, password authentication, we're going to set that to no. Okay, let's do Control X and yes, enter. And now we want to just reload that SSHD using this command here. So sudo systemctl reload SSH or SSHD. Okay, so that should work. Now if we want to test that out, we can close our session, go back into Putty, And let's try without the SSH keys. Let's see if it'll let us with a password, which it shouldn't. So let's grab the IP, paste that in, click open. Let's say login as Brad, and it's not letting us. It says no supported authentication methods available. So that's exactly what should happen. All right, so we're done with the preparation of the security, I guess, disabling the logins and so on. So now we can start to install Node.js and start to deploy our application. So again, let's go into Putty. Okay, and I'm going to just load up our session here. Let's make sure we're logging as Brad or whatever you used, and open. All right, so let me just make this bigger. All right, let's close this up, close that. So now what we want to do is install Node.js. Now on Linux Ubuntu, we can't just do apt-get install Node.js. It won't work. It needs to, we need to tell it to use the node source repository. So if we look at our blog post here, we need this command, okay, this curl command. And this is for node 6. If you want to use node 7, you can just replace that with 7. All right, so let's paste that in. Run that. And this is just standard. If you went to the Node.js documentation and looked up how to install it on Ubuntu, you'd see that command. So now with that done, we should be able to say sudo apt-get install Node.js. All right, so Node.js is now installed on our server. We can say node v -v, and we see we have version 6.9.4. All right, so now that that's done, we need to install Git on the server. So we can do that with sudo apt-get install Git. Okay, let's say git v or git version. Okay. And then what we need to do is we need to set some SSH keys for GitHub. Now let's take a look at the application we'll be using. So I'm just going to search for sample Node.js app GitHub. So right here, it's actually the Heroku sample. We're not using Heroku, but we're going to use this app. It basically is just a simple Express app, and I think it just says hello world. But if we go and we try to clone it, say yes, you'll see we get denied. We get this permission denied public key. So we need to set up SSH keys with GitHub. So if we go back to the blog post, we need to run right here this SSH Keygen, and that'll create our keys to add to GitHub. All right, so let's do SSH-Keygen, and we want to add -t RSA, and then we need to put -C and then put our GitHub email. Okay, so enter the file where you want to save the key, just click enter. Now you can put a passphrase if you want, but I'm just going to enter for no passphrase. Alright, so now it put the key in home Brad or whatever your username .ssh, and then in a file called id.rsa.pub. So we need to copy the contents of that file. Now instead of trying to copy through Putty, which is an absolute nightmare, we're going to use a tool called WinSCP, which you should have anyways, and it gives us a way to connect to our server with a graphical interface. So we're going to go ahead and download that. We want the installation package. Okay, now this is an installer, so we'll just have to install it real quick. Alright, so let's just go through this. We'll accept, and typical installation. We're going to choose the defaults here, install. Alright, now it's asking us, says we have stored sessions in Putty, talking about our Traversy Media droplet. Do you want to import them? I'm going to click yes. Okay. And then we're going to choose to launch it. And notice that we now have Traversy Media droplet, and it has all the information, and then we'll click login. Alright, so we're now in our droplet. If I go up one or up two, you'll see this is the entire server we have in this program. We can drag and drop files as we want. Now notice that in the home directory, in the Brad directory, there's no .ssh. That's because it's hidden by default. It has a dot in front of it, which makes it hidden. So what we want to do is click in this little path thing right here and just go /.ssh. Whoops. And OK, and then that'll bring us into that folder. And you'll notice we have the ID RSA pub file. That's the GitHub SSH key file. So let's bring that over to Documents. And then I'm going to go to my Documents folder. And there it is right there. Let's open that up. I'm going to open it with Notepad. And it should look like this. Alright, so we're going to just copy this. Make sure you don't have any spaces or anything at the end. Copy that. And then we're going to go to GitHub. Okay, make sure you're logged in, and then go to Settings. And right here, SSH and GPG keys. And we're going to say new SSH key. And let's just call it my key. And then we'll paste it in here. Alright, so add SSH key. It's going to ask for your password. And now it's added. So now we should be able to clone the repository. So let's try it again. Alright, so now if we say ls to list the contents, you can see we have a folder called Node.js sample. Alright, that's our application. So all you would have to do now is when you create an application on your client, just go ahead and create a Git repository, upload it there, and then you can just pull it into your server. Okay, it's as simple as that. So now we're going to just cd into our app. So Node.js sample. Alright, now we're going to have to run npm install to install the dependencies that are in the package.json file, just like you would on your client machine. Okay, and then what we can do is we can say npm start, and it's running on port 5000. So let's grab our IP address, and we'll go to our IP address and then port 5000, and there's our app. Okay, not very pretty, but it is an Express application, and it's running remotely. Alright, now there's a problem with just running it like this, because if for some reason the server shuts down or this stops, it's gonna just, our application is gonna be dead. So we want to, let's do Control-C to get out of this, and we're gonna use something called PM2 so that we can run our application as a process. So let's say sudo npm install. We want this globally, so -g and then PM2. Alright, now to run this app with PM2, we're just going to say PM2 start, and then this application has an entry file of index.js. Now it could be app.js, server.js. This particular app is index. So we're going to say PM2 start index.js. Alright, and now you can see that our app is online. Our command line is still freed up, which is good. And if we go and we reload, it's still running. Okay. Now the next thing we want to do is add a domain name, because obviously you don't want to use your IP address. So I'm going to go to enom central. Oh. I think it's .com. And you'll want to go to wherever your domain is registered, but I have a couple domains here that I'm not using. So I'm going to go to, let's see, domains, my domains, and I'm going to use this CodeLearner.net domain. Now what you're going to want to do is log into your registrar, and you're going to want to change your name servers. Okay, so this is how you do it in Enom, but you can do this in GoDaddy or Namecheap, wherever you're hosting your domain name. And you just want to add ns1digitalocean.com, ns2, and ns3, all digitalocean.com, and then save. All right, now it could take a half hour or a couple hours to propagate, so if what we're doing here doesn't work right away, don't worry about it. It might just need to kick in. All right, but go ahead and change those. I already have those set. And we're going to go back to DigitalOcean, and we're going to go to networking. Oops, I already have it. Let me just delete that. You guys won't have that. All right, so we're going to want to add the domain. Okay. And then what we're going to want to do here is add an A record. Now, if you wanted this to be at a subdomain like app.codelearner.net, you would put that in. I want it to be at the actual root codelearner.net, so I'm just going to put the @ symbol. And then here, you either want to put the IP address, but DigitalOcean actually gives you this nice drop down of all your droplets, and you can choose which one you want. Then we're going to click Create Record. Okay, record's created successfully. Next thing we're going to do is go to CNAME, and we want to make sure the www version goes to it as well. So just put in www, and then here we're going to put the @ symbol and create record. All right, so now if we go to http codelearner.net, and we're going to go to port 5000. And there's our application. So our application is now connected to a domain. Now, the last thing you're probably wondering is, how do we get rid of this 5,000? You're not going to want that. That's not very professional. So to do that, we're going to change our app to run on port 80, which is the default HTTP port. Now, if you just do that alone, you're going to get errors. It's not going to work, but there's a package we can install that'll let us use it. So what we're going to do is stop the app with pm2 stop index.js. Okay, that'll stop it. And then I'm going to use WinSCP. Actually, no, we don't need to do that. Let's just use nano. So we'll say sudo nano, and we want to edit index.js. What do I do? Suko. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just change the port. Okay, right here it's 5000. Let's change that to 80. All right, and then we'll just Control X and then Y, enter. All right, so if we try to run it, let's say npm start, it gives us this error basically saying, hey, you can't run it on port 80. So what we're going to do is install a package. So if we go back to the blog post, and right here, this sudo apt-get install libcap2-bin. That's what we want. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, and then we want this last command here. This is the set cap. Basically, we're going to bind the service to that port. So we're going to just copy that. And let's run it. Okay. And now we should be able to start our application, and it will run on port 80. So let's do pm start index.js. pm2. Okay, so now, moment of truth, we're going to go to http codelearner.net, no port number, and there we go. So our Node.js application has been deployed to a remote server, and we connected a domain name to it. All right, so I really hope you guys learned something from this. Now, like I said, I'm not going to say this is the best way to do things. In fact, I'm sure there's many of you tech guys that are criticizing certain things that I've done throughout this tutorial. But, you know, this is a free tutorial, and I'm just trying to help people out. trying to give them an idea of what it takes to deploy an application. I will be making other deployment videos with Node.js and others. My next video will probably be using flight plan from a Linux machine, a Linux client. And I'm not really sure what we'll do after that. Maybe some mean stack stuff. But again, hopefully you guys like this. If you did, please subscribe. Please leave a like. And I will see you next time.